Even regionally, I feel like it would be awesome for you to like hand deliver on like a road trip, like a painting to someone.
Like I think that there's a lot of potential marketing opportunity, but like around vlogging something like that,
Totally,
and like putting it together for $200. Like if you think about that,
that's a road trip.
Yeah, it's a nice little road trip for you and hubby, and you make it to Kansas City in half a day, and you deliver it, and you're like vlogging the whole.
With that being said, do you feel like you are like the type of personality who like documents yourself naturally?
Not myself, no.
Okay.
And I've tried to be a little bit more conscious of that, especially with my Instagram and stuff like that, of trying to add in more of a human element to it.
Yeah.
I think if it was just me, then I would just document work and like the tip of my paintbrush and canvas, and I think all of that stuff to me is way more interesting.
Yeah.
But like response-wise, I always get a more favorable response whenever there's more of a human aspect into it, which I get. And I think one of the things I'm trying to work on at the moment is verbalizing and putting into words my practice a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that in college to the point of like I just give up. But I'm really trying to communicate more effectively about my work and about my practice, because I think that that's a really essential part of people connecting to it and getting kind of a deeper understanding of kind of what's going on in my mind, and kind of the backstory behind what they're seeing initially.
Totally.
Which doesn't have to be there. Like I think great art stands on its own for sure, but there's just a deeper level of connection there. And I think that people in the art world, like curators, and like hopefully again as my career kind of progresses, that's going to be a lot more essential to people with higher powers that can help things move. So
yeah, like Logan's personality, he like documents nonstop himself, everything around him, just naturally. For me, I like never think about it ever. So if you go to my Instagram, literally zero content.
Totally.
0% content.
I'm looking through your Instagram right now, Ray, just like scrolling through it, like as a I think that you have such a cool, consistent aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it like makes me want to ask too, like who these photographs that are obviously not you taking selfies.
Right.
Do you have a friend that is a photographer and like, just swings through sometimes and takes photos of you, or do you and your husband, because some of them are of you and your husband too, and I mean some of them are obviously like a wedding photo or something like that, but some of them look like just trips or something like that. Like who in your life is shooting you?
There's a great friend who did our engagement photos, and then we did a shoot together. Her name is Lindy. She helped us out with that. There's another girl who I found on Instagram. She's like friends of somebody that I knew from high school, and she's done a couple of shoots with me, where I asked her for headshots because I needed them, and then she like had a random thing on Instagram of like, hey, there's fog outside, who wants to shoot with me? Let's do it for $50. And I'm like, me. And then I'm trying to think.
These shots of like your workspaces, is that just you and an iPhone, or is that the same people?
There's one of me with an iPhone. I feel like I just discovered the self-timer where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And like literally propped it up on a chair and like went over there, and I'm like, I hope my face doesn't look weird. There's some like really light and airy shots that, are from a great friend and her husband who helped me with my branding that hopefully that will be launching soon. So they're brilliant, beautiful people.
Who are they?
So their names are Nate and Katrina Ward, and their design company is called Half Design, and then Nate works for Ghost. They're on Broadway, in Automobile Alley.
Right.
They're great. But they're helping me we're doing kind of an exchange where I'm paying them like part in cash and then part with a painting.
Cool.
They're beautiful, awesome people. So I've got some shots from them as well. Yeah, and my brand, I'm really excited to hopefully launch a website and all that stuff in the next couple of months. So
That's awesome. So what you already have the URL, I'm assuming. So what will your website be?
It is raestone.co.
Nice.
Okay, cool.
And there's the
Edgy.
I know. I know.
Dot
So
com.
European of you.
I
Forget
know.
the M.
Well, we looked at .art, but again, I wanted it to be a little bit more like ambiguous, so really you don't totally know what you're getting
God,
into.
I love that. There's
Yeah.
so like that's my favorite way to brand and to like I really love living in the no, you're gonna have to work a little bit to understand
Totally.
me sort of space. Like
Totally.
that's so
Well,
cool.
And I think there's an aspect of it that it's like people don't want to be told what to do
Yeah.
or what to think. And I think if you can give them more, like,
Just drop some breadcrumbs.
right, that
Yeah.
they
Well,
want
people like to
they wanna
discover
figure
things
it
too,
out.
yeah.
And yeah, so there was a lot of kind of little bits in that, and we didn't want my branding to be too obvious and colors to be too obvious, and
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff for it to be a little bit more ambiguous and for the work to either shine through or just like I don't want stuff to like hit people in the face.
Yeah.
It's not really my style, and it is some people's style, and I almost think that goes along with my work as well.
Sure.
I'm not really like a shock
Sure.
artist where I'm like trying to like go out and create these crazy things and
Right.
you know, yeah, where I'm just trying to create something that's really beautiful and that leaves space for people in it.
Yeah.
So they can have a moment, yeah, to have some peace while they're looking at what I've made.
I just love like the thoughtfulness behind everything. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there are people out there who will like hustle and learn all of these like different aspects of things and do everything across the board
Yeah.
pretty okay.
Yeah.
And then there's some people who are like, I want like a sounding board and I want to utilize
Yeah.
like someone to help me with branding, and I feel like there's just a beautiful like, I don't know, organism aspect to like working and collaborating with people.
100%.
And you
yeah.
mentioned paying like partial, like with cash and painting.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with a friend this week actually about how like bartering in the creative community is like a real thing.
For sure,
and like
yeah.
is kind of like rising up a little bit more than it has in the past.
Yeah.
Have you had experiences like that aside from this one where you're like paying partial for like services or like
Yeah.
trading?
Well, yeah, I've traded painting for a haircut and color before.
Love it.
So that was really fun. I feel like I've done it on like more institutes. I think it could happen more. I think that there's this like really initial awkwardness of like, what do you place your value at, and then
Sure.
where am I placing my value at? Where if it's not really clearly stated, like I never want to cheat somebody out of
course.
something,
Yeah.
and I never want to like undervalue what somebody's doing, and I don't want to undervalue. We're in a like there's also this like really awkward thing of price and money exchange with creative things where
And amongst creative people, because
Totally.
a lot of them don't think about it as businessy as it seems as though you do, and so
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, yeah, but I know that only took you 3 hours, you know, like or
Right, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
They kind of like cut through to it's not like its actual value is very different than how long it took me to do
totally
it.
then like man hours
Right,
and
right.
stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's like the strange nature of art in general. It's like
For sure.
it's as much as you're willing to pay. Like that's
Oh,
the value. You place the
100%.
value, which I think is the beauty of barter, because like cash is literally so arbitrary in the fact that someone just said this sheet of paper is worth 100 things. You know, like
I trip
currency.
myself out thinking about crap like that
Yeah,
all the time.
it can get really
Like,
stony
this
about it.
whole thing is built on these tiny little pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Right. It
But,
is
like,
about
yeah.
exchange though, from like one person to another, and I think that's the beautiful thing. Hopefully, well, and Oklahoma's like such a weird place in the world for it as well. Like I
Yeah.
think
In
people
terms
are
of art value,
yeah, as
Yeah.
far as like almost visual art value as like I don't know. I think there's just like an interesting culture around it, and I've talked about it with a lot of other creatives, like visually or just kind of in general about the space I don't know, like what Oklahomans deem as like valuable, because there's an interesting aspect of like the people who can afford to pay thousands of dollars for paintings are not going to buy them in Oklahoma City. They're going to buy them in LA. They're going to buy them in New York. They're going to buy them in Paris or whatever. So if you're someone's from big oil money or family money or whatever, they're not going to spend their big money in Oklahoma City. They're going to spend it in other cities.
Totally.
So there's an interesting dichotomy. And even my professors in college, I had one he was a sculptor. He was awesome, but he was probably like 65 or whatever. And he kind of talked about it. He's like, one of the most damaging things to my career is the fact that I'm from Oklahoma. It's like if I was from anywhere else, then I would then my career would be like so much better. So I think that's one of the things that I've wrestled against in the past couple of years of well,
because you basically have to make the decision of, do I want to be someone who claims to be from Oklahoma and helps set the tone for good art from Oklahoma, or do I want to have immediate success and accessibility by claiming somewhere else, which is interesting. And the thing about Oklahoma too is you'll have these people with oil money who want to buy art, but instead of buying something like this, they'll go buy a horseshoe and railroad stake, installation that's very Western and and pay tons of money for it, but it's not necessarily what I would be oh, that's great art,
For sure.
So
yeah. No, it is really interesting.
It's definitely an interesting place to live, especially in this time.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the World Wide Web earlier, but it really is opening the gate, the accessibility and revealing that Oklahoma is not horses and teepees, but it's there's real great art here.
I'm so interested in what, I know we're not currently in the Paseo's heyday, but I know that based on what it looks like, there had to have been a heyday. And I think it's still really a strong, art-centric area. But I feel like there had to have been a moment when that little block was really booming. And I know it's kind of people have poured money into it recently, in terms of buildings and businesses and things like that. But I wonder if, in terms of specifically art value, if there was a time when that was at its highest, and then we had the internet and everyone was business, Wall Street, whatever.
Sure.
And if now our generation is kind of
ramping back,
trying to, there's so many more makers and creators.
Yep.
Not even of just specific art, our friend Tyler, hand stitching, all of this stuff that, I mean, essentially it could be outsourced to Mexico or, anywhere,
sure,
but there's so much more respect with things that are handcrafted. It's so much more revered than, maybe I just wasn't aware of it, but than it was 10 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if and even neighborhoods like this, if we are able to put a staple art gallery that's maybe more local next to 21C, and this one's constantly revolving, and it's all and only local artists. I know that there have been a few galleries like that. I wonder if they were in the wrong place. I don't know.
For the right time. Yeah.
And I feel the value of art, at least as far as it is on my radar, seems to be slightly trending up.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah, and I think it's hard for me to differentiate just the upward trajectory of my personal career with the way that the Oklahoma City scene sees it.
Right.
Because I mean, I don't know of is my art just getting better? Are people more interested?
Right.
And I think there is really something to people who are aware and conscious. Feels weird, but people who are woke. Sure. So whatever.
Sure.
Whether or not they want to buy sustainable clothing and they don't want to buy from fast fashion, and then they want to put original art on their walls. Just seeing value in what you're kind of seeing, that handmade, original, quality type things, instead of something really cheap that they can just throw up. And I think art has a place in that.
For sure.
And
For sure.
and part of me kind of struggles with like, is that the audience that I'm aiming for? Am I wanting to just have this career where it just like reaches people in Oklahoma City, or am I wanting to have a career that like reaches across the nation? Am I wanting to have a career that one day will get a painting or a piece will get put into MoMA, or that I'll have, you know, shows in New York City? And I think I'm wrestling with like almost putting, or not knowing, do I value, feels weird, but like, am I gonna fight for the art scene in Oklahoma City, or am I gonna be a little bit more selfish and wanna fight for my career and my work and like my pieces?
Yeah, I feel you.
You know, and it's a weird kind of, am I happy with just selling people for their, like selling art for living rooms? Is that the goal, for art to be among people? Like, or is there a wider discourse there? Like, do my pieces, like, what's the right environment for them? Are they meant to be around people? Are they meant to be like in white boxes? And I've like, Mark Rothko was like very, very specific about how his pieces were viewed, and I feel like I haven't had the almost the privilege of like dictating that yet. And there's a lot of ideas like really swirling of like, should a painting be viewed in close quarters and then far away, or like how things are viewed and how the atmosphere feels? And I think scale has a lot to do with that, and practice, and I feel like I'm going off.
No,
that's
it's
great.
important. I'm picking everything up. I know exactly what you're saying.
There's a lot of questions there for sure that I want to explore.
Even what you were mentioning about like your social media presence and stuff, about the greater response being with like the humanity of it. I think that's something that culture in general is trending towards, because we've experienced such a digital revolution of like, we have access to everything, but I think what everyone is craving is like a humanity aspect, that human interaction aspect. I think even, you know, what you're talking about with like Tyler's hand stitch stuff, it's like you could easily go buy that for maybe half the price, less quality, but like half the price in Mexico. But the fact that like, this is a dude who's like sewing things locally, this is an artist who's doing things locally, and there's an aspect of humanity to it, I think is super attractive. And I think that people are like wanting that and longing for that.
For sure.
So
I think that at like our generation specifically is kind of bringing that, or when I say our generation, I guess I mean like 25 to 35 or 40, like these people that have kind of grown up in the 80s and 90s. For whatever reason, we seem to be the ones that are trying to reach back to hand production and locally created and locally sourced and whatever. I think that there's so much value built into the fact that I'm supporting this person's family, I'm supporting,
totally,
rather than sending it off to some dictator type businessman that's figured out how to harness 40 people in a factory somewhere, whatever.
It has a bad impact on environment and stuff like that.
Totally.
Right. So I'm really interested in what you think as far as, like, you talk about kind of being at war with how your pieces should be viewed.
Yeah.
I mean, where have you landed anywhere on that? Because that's a really interesting, I guess, subject to me as an artist and as a person that like walks through museums and like is really fascinated with someone that not only wants to create something but also wants to create the experience with how you interact with that.
No, for sure.
I think that that's such a cool, it may be a longer, harder road. In terms of, scaling something from a business perspective, because not everyone's going to get it. No one can take it home.
Right.
Nobody can talk about their friends with it because it's not in their living room.
Yeah.
But what do you view as more respected?
I think there's in some ways I feel like I don't have like the privilege to go there yet. Like, I'm still in the beginning phases. Like, if I was in a perfect world, like this and this would happen. I also think that like, I do think that the exhibit environment is really something that I would like to play with, that there is an anticipation, and I feel like everything that I've done and everything that I've seen, at least here happening in Oklahoma City, is like really boring. I'm sure there's exciting things happening in other cities, but I think as far as like art, like the way that we're displaying and interacting with it is not like interesting at all.
Yeah.
Like I think that even when I'm wanting, the thing that I kind of come back to is I want to put someone in a slightly uncomfortable but like just different. I want to change the way that they're viewing it. Just even if that's something like they're walking down into something and then they have to like duck to get into a room to like see something.
Right. Have you been to Factory Obscura?
Yeah. Well, I haven't been in, but I'm really familiar with it, and I know friends who have like worked in it and stuff.
I think that is definitely part of probably the cutting edge for our small metro experience. I think that is really a really fascinating environment, and,
For sure.
and specifically, it seems like that is what they're tackling. It like the interaction of art, the tangibility of it, the tactile, like the being inundated with sound and light and space and color. But it is really new. To like experiential art, and the way it's displayed is very, very new to even probably the mindset of most people here. Most people here think of the 21C type experience where you just walk around and you see a little placard and you're like, oh, that guy took this picture there.
For sure.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Or like the Oklahoma City Museum, which each room is like really, I don't want to speak against it. It's like great, but it's boring. Like there's nothing exciting about it. The experience is not exciting.
Sure.
Walking in, there's nothing fun. And I'm kind of wanting to marry that experience with painting, and like how do we view painting, because Factory Obscura is amazing, but it's more about the experience. It's not quite as much about let's look at this really exciting image. So there's a lot of like different ideas of like running through my mind, because I think if people like, okay, I'm going to an art exhibition, there's going to be some wine, there might be some snacks, and people are just going to be standing around. They're going to look at it, the painting, for 2 seconds, and then they're done because it's boring. Like, to wanting to create a little bit more interest. And I've almost thought of it of like, what if there were like floating shows or like interesting spaces. I would love to do something in a warehouse or like or in a back alley. Again, just wanting to put art in a really contrasting areas where you can look at it and see it in an interesting way, where it's an exciting thing for people to go experience and look at, where it can be a longer experience. Because I feel like, again, people feel pressure to look at something and understand it, and so when they don't understand it, then they like check out really quickly, or they think that there's something more like the higher. I don't know. I get like a lot of questions of like, what's your art about? Or is there like, I'm like, I don't know. It's just like color and shape and the way that it interacts. Like there's no narrative behind what I do, and I think that's intimidating sometimes, because people think that there has to be something, or they're not getting it, and then they feel weird because they're not getting it.